So in a previous video I showed you that I had installed the Magpul Hunter Bottom Metal into a Bell and Carlson stock. The bottom metal from Magpul is designed to use the AICS pattern magazines, of which Magpul introduced their own 5-round version with a 10-round to come. And it's actually designed to drop into the Remington 700 stock that they sell called the Magpul Hunter. Now, it does mention that on the Magpul literature that you can install it on other guns, but gunsmithing is required. So I did have to do some fitting in order to actually get this installed on the Bell and Carlson stock here. I've actually had some questions and some messages sent recently about exactly what I had to do in order to get it to fit. So I wanted to do another quick video. I'm not going to actually show the inletting process because I've already done it, but I wanted to show you a little bit of what I actually ended up doing to get the Magpul Hunter Bottom Metal to fit in this Bell and Carlson stock. Now, first a little bit of warning. Again, it's not made to fit in there, so you're going to have to break out your Dremel or a mill or something like that and do some fitting. You may make mistakes. You may damage one or the other. I'm going to show you actually some places where I Dremeled off a little more than I needed to, or another spot where I kind of had to Dremel a little extra, and because of that there's now a little bit of extra space around the stock. So if you're going to do this yourself, go slow, take your time, check for fit frequently, and of course ultimately it's kind of your own risk as far as what happens to it. So first off, let's take a look at the bottom side of the bottom metal here. So as you can see, it replaces everything between the two screws. Replaces your trigger guard and all of the bottom metal that comes with the factory. Now I would definitely suggest trying to start with at least a hinged floor plate, if not a factory detachable bottom metal. If you're starting with a blind bottom where there's no inletting at all and it has a blind magazine, you're going to have to start from scratch cutting the holes, and that's going to take a lot of work. So start with at least the hinged floor plate. I'm going to show you that in a little bit, what that looks like. So if you look closely, the edges around here are not perfectly fit, but I did actually have to relieve a little bit of width. I had to relieve the front, and I had to relieve a little bit in the back to get this to fit. Overall, forward of the kind of the edge of the trigger guard, the Magpul bottom metal is a little bit bigger around for pretty much this entire magazine area. So you're going to have to remove some material around all of that. So again, you can see up in the front, there was part of the time when I was removing some material from the front where I felt like it was still catching on the front, and it was actually catching on a piece of the inside, which I'll show you here in a minute. But I kept removing a little bit of material, thinking it needed to just drop into place, and as you can see, it wasn't until later that I caught my mistake, and by then I'd removed a little bit too much material on the outside here. So let's take a little bit of a look at what the factory floor plate will look like now that I've removed enough material for the Magpul bottom metal, because this will actually give you a little bit better idea of what's happening and how much material was removed and from where. So this is the Remington 700 hinged floor plate. Just comes standard on a number of the guns. This is what I was working from. So you can see, if you look around the edges, where I actually removed material from. So with the barreled action removed, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the material that was removed from the inside. So primarily, the majority of the material had to be removed along these edges and the front part of where the bottom metal was itself. Now, the majority of that came from towards the front, because if you remember, on the factory bottom metal, it has kind of an angled, it gets quite a bit narrower at the front. And the Magpul bottom metal has more of a squared shape to it. So I removed a lot more material at the front, but I did have to remove a little bit at the back, and I had to square out the back side of the magazine a little bit, because the way the Magpul bottom metal fit, the back was a little bit more square and came back just a little bit further. I also ended up having to remove material lower down, right here in front of where the front pillar is. And you can see I actually try to remove a fair amount of this aluminum block, and it was a pain. I actually got a diamond bit for the Dremel, and even with that, it was very, very slow going. So that is a big part of why I ended up modifying part of the bottom metal itself. It was so difficult to remove the aluminum bedding that I decided, instead of spending the time and possibly damaging the structural integrity anymore, that it would be easier to just go ahead and modify the bottom metal a little bit and remove material from there where necessary. I did end up relieving just a little bit in this around the front action screw here. Just a little bit in there. It didn't take very much. Now in the back here, the way the trigger guard was, if you look at the factory trigger guard compared to the Magpul one, on the back section, there's a little bit more material here on the factory one than there is on the Magpul one. You can see there's part of the magazine guide. So here in the trigger guard, I had to remove a little more material from the stock, and then again I ran into the same issue with running into the aluminum bedding block, and I decided, instead of removing the aluminum bedding block, to remove material from the bottom metal itself. In the back here, this already had kind of an angle up, and it's kind of hard to see, but you'll notice I actually kind of rounded this a little bit more, is basically what I did. So in order to help it clear the aluminum block in the back, I cut in just a little bit and I rounded it. Now along the sides here, there was actually a little bit of a tab on the Magpul bottom metal that I started inletting for, and ultimately, as I started removing material from the bottom metal itself, decided I would rather remove the tab from the bottom metal, because it would have required a little bit of an extra cut into the side of this entire opening. There would be a gap on either side for that tab. So ultimately I just ended up removing that tab completely. So if you look at some of the photos of the Magpul bottom metal, you'll notice that there was a tab similar to this one right here that I actually cut off of the front. So that was one of the changes. You'll notice between this tab and there was a small piece in the front of it that stuck up. That's what I was noticing was catching on that aluminum block in the front. So I kept trying to remove material and it wouldn't quite work. So ultimately I just cut this off basically at the level where it will come just to the edge of the aluminum block. On the top side, you'll notice I actually did not have to remove any material. So the top side was left basically as is. So that gives you an idea of some of the modifications that I made. Depending on the stock you use, obviously this was one version of the Bell and Carlson stock. And if you have a different version of the Bell and Carlson or another manufacturer, some of the changes that you need to make may be different, but so far I've been very pleased with using the Magpul bottom metal. I've only used it with the Magpul magazine so far, but those have worked very well. I'm hoping to either get some of the 10 rounds soon, or if they don't come out with those very quickly, then I may be picking up some of the AICS or Accurate Mag versions to try. But if you're looking to do this yourself, that may give you a little bit better idea of how much effort went into it. I would say it took me in total maybe about an hour and a half to 2 hours, and that was with a lot of dremeling and then removing, cleaning it up, and then putting the bottom metal back in to see how the fit went. And as you saw, I did make some mistakes, but overall, for the price and for the relatively cheap stock and the cheap cost of the Magpul bottom metal, I'm still pretty happy with it. So if you have any other questions, please let me know.